Hello again everyone, I hope you're all keeping well. In this video I'll be speaking with you about why you need to be cautious when it comes to seeking a spiritual teacher, or if you wish to encounter any kind of quote-unquote enlightened being. Okay? Part of it has to do with the fact that there are many charlatans in this world of ours, many godmen who set up all kinds of cult-like followings, and they purport to not wish for any type of material gain or wealth, and yet oftentimes you'll find that that is of paramount importance to them in real terms. But that's just a small issue. Okay, if you are discerning enough and wise enough, you will avoid that pitfall. There's a deeper problem, however, and it's not really a problem if you're prepared for it. But the issue is one of how ready you are. Okay, how ready are you to have to face up to certain aspects of yourself that you would much rather ignore? Because any kind of remotely enlightened person would make you look in the mirror at your very worst behaviors, at your very worst actions, and ask you, why did you do that? And then they would make you question many parts of your persona, your character, and who you think you are. Because who we think we are isn't actually who we are at all, in its fullest sense. Okay? We've created these false images about ourselves. We've created many a false narrative about ourselves. And we want to fit into these boxes, these categories. Nobody wants to think of themselves as a villain. Everybody wants to think of themselves as a hero, for example. Right? And the same thing's true of the roles that we fulfill in society. Even inside our own families, mother, father, child, brother, sister, or your significant other and how you relate to them, husband, wife, so on. And we define ourselves by those roles, when in real terms that's only a slice of who you are. It's an important slice to be sure, but it's still one slice. Okay? So the enlightened master would push you in the extreme to ask why you are doing what you're doing. Every single action, every single word, every single thought. And it would make you doubt yourself. So profoundly, in fact, that if you aren't careful, you would have a complete breakdown. Okay? This is why I say to people, if you're not ready to travel down that path, don't do it. Everybody today, right? Well, not everyone, but many people are all about wanting to become enlightened without realizing what the heck that actually means. Alright? And it's become a fashion, a fad, right? Everyone wants to do it. But if they really did it, ask yourself this question: would the world be in the mess that it's in right now? No, because what would happen is that those people would have achieved a level of consciousness. That is to say, they would be conscious in the moment, preferably all moments. Okay? They would know which actions they are performing or what thoughts they are having about themselves or about others, which are harmful to them or causing suffering for them or for other people. Okay? This is not happening. Certainly not in the aggregate. And this is the proof, all the proof that you need to realize that people talk a good game, when it comes to wanting to become enlightened, but they never truly attempt it. Because one of the things that you have to do is to abandon your sense of attachment to the false ideals, the false paradigms, the false images, the false narratives. You have to abandon all of that. And not a lot of people can do that. I'll give you an example of this, all right? In the case of infatuation, people get infatuated by another person. What happens? They put them onto this pedestal, all right? And they create these false images in their mind about who that person is without realizing that the other person is a human being just like you. You never want to consider, because you're seeing through these rose-tinted glasses, all right? You never want to consider that the other person has many flaws, many foibles. They eat, they drink, they breathe, they go to the bathroom just like you do. All right? But many people don't want to consider that when they are in that state of infatuation. And that's just one simple example. But a person can invest so much in that emotionally. Okay? They can invest so much of their energy into becoming attached to that ideal or to that image that they become self-destructive. So when a spiritual master comes along and says to them, well, you have to not attach yourself to anything, you have to practice detachment, and you have to let go of your attachments to these false ideas, they don't react very well to it, because they don't want to acknowledge that they've wasted their time. Okay? And this isn't just the case with the roles that people fulfill or the ideas people hold, but it's the case with everything that they do in their life as well. I'll give you a great example of this. People like to invest so much time and energy into their careers. And that's not to say that the career isn't an important part of what they are or what they're doing or who they are. But it's not the be-all and end-all of that person. And yet when they're forced to question whether it has been worthwhile for them to do what they've done, this becomes a moment of crisis within that person. Do you see? So it's not a road to be travelled down lightly. It's not a fashion. Okay? You should not want to do it because it's the in thing. Do you see where I'm coming from? Right? The other problem is that any time that an enlightened being has ever made themselves visible to any person or group, and by that I'm not talking about the fact they have powers of invisibility, okay? I'm making the point that most of the time you'll find enlightened beings don't actually want to be in the fray. They would much rather sit on a mountaintop somewhere in a cave and just focus on their own conscious being. Okay? But anytime they have interacted with the majority of humanity through history, it's been the case that they have never been well received. You need only look at the biblical canonical story of Jesus, who opposed in his time the very vampiric practices of these bankers of his day, who were bleeding people dry, all in the name of acquisition. And he did the same thing when it came to the priest classes of religion. He did not like the fact that they were purposefully keeping the populace dumbed down just to fit in with the political paradigm of that time. And then, of course, he opposed the political forces of that time, that is to say, the Romans. And for this, Christ was crucified. Okay? So we see how society treats its great ascended spiritual beings. You see the same thing with Gandhi, with Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and also with many other people that have come along to tell humanity some fundamental deep truths. Okay? Anytime a fundamental deep truth has been put into view, the person bringing it is looked upon with disdain. So, are we really looking for enlightenment then, if this is the environment which we create as a society? I would say no. Okay? We don't really want to be enlightened. We don't really want to understand one another's suffering. Because if this was the case, then we wouldn't have so much suffering occurring all the time. Now, the other thing is that there's a question about whether or not it is a moral right to continue in a state of ignorance. Okay? Is it right that we allow people to continuously be ignorant then, if they're not ready for enlightenment? And the answer to that is no. Because regardless of what happens in this physical world of ours, the courage to speak any kind of profound truth is itself of value. The demonstration of courage is itself a value. Okay? And it's a value that we should incorporate into ourselves. Or we should try to. Others have led by example. But again, if you're not ready, then you're not ready. Perhaps those people need to start with small steps. Okay? That's not a bad thing. At least they're trying. And there's no such thing necessarily as one person being more enlightened than another person, if they have indeed become enlightened in some way, shape, or form. Provided that a person is conscious in all moments, then there is no discernible difference in the quality of their enlightenment. They might have just found various methods and routes towards it, but it doesn't negate that they are themselves enlightened. And what does being enlightened mean at the end of the day anyway? Right? For some people, it is this wackadoodle notion that they will gain great mystic powers, that they will gain some kind of supernatural powers. Okay? And this is a silly way to look at any path towards becoming aware. Because there's nothing supernatural about becoming more conscious, about becoming more able to do something. Okay? There's nothing remotely supernatural or superstitious involved in that. Okay? There are things that we might not understand about a fully conscious being. Things that maybe they can do that appear strange to the rest of us. But that doesn't mean that they're performing some kind of supernatural feat. But that's a slightly different subject. So when it comes to spiritual teachers, getting back to that, there's also another point to be made on this, which is that how do you know that a spiritual teacher will want to accept you as a student? Because oftentimes people negate the fact that the teacher themselves has free will. They could choose not to teach you. But oftentimes we don't take that into account, you see, because we have these very faulty notions. But even if they did, and you began on that journey, okay, would it change your life in any discernible way, materially or physically? I can tell you the answer to that is very simple. The answer is no. I've said this before many times, but I'll say it again. The Buddhists have this fantastic saying. It goes something like this: before enlightenment, you carry water and chop wood. Okay? Before enlightenment, you carry water and chop wood. Do you know what happens after enlightenment? You carry water and chop wood. The difference is within you. The difference qualitatively happens in your own processes, in your mind, in your body, in your spirit. That's where the change takes place. Your whole perspective shifts, your attitude changes. Okay? And you become aware of yourself. And the fact that you are a unique being in this physical life, and yet you are a part of something greater. By default, the life force within you is always seeking to expand itself beyond its own borders, beyond its own horizons. It always is seeking for more, to be more. And if it's not channeled properly, this is what becomes ultimately greed. Okay? Or sometimes a twisted form of love or hate. Okay? If it's not channeled properly, these are the ways in which it expresses itself. Because your being knows by its nature, by virtue of its own being, really, strange as that might sound, it knows that it wants to be more. It knows that it can't be contained. It wants to connect with everything out there, the great expanse. But it doesn't realize that it's already connected. And that's not due to anything else except for the fact that you have been taught. You have been miseducated. Alright? You've been taught that you are separate from everything else and everyone else. To such a degree that you don't even realize how much damage you're doing to yourself when you inflict some kind of violence in many instances on someone else. And I'm not talking about the redefinitions of violence. The true definition of violence is violating another person's natural right to exist, free of molestation and harm. Okay? We could break that down even more, but let's not do that in this video. I might do that at a future time. The point is this, that not only are we forced to think of ourselves as separate from other people to that massive a degree, but we're also forced to think of ourselves as being separate from God, from the creative principle, the creative force, the source of all existence. And this is one of the worst things that has been done to humanity in a real sense. So we cause ourselves pain, great pain, seeking for that which is already within us and within others. And it's actually within all life forms. We do ourselves tremendous damage by that. You'll notice this. Think about what happens when you pray. Which direction are you looking at when you're praying? Where do you think God resides? People are always looking up. Have you ever noticed this? People are always looking up into the skies, into the heavens, into the great unknown abyss of space. Okay? It doesn't matter which religious denomination they're a part of. They're always looking externally. Now, the wisest cultures that have ever come along, they do something else. They look downwards. Okay? They look downwards at the earth and they say, that's where God resides, and in here is where God resides, and within you is where God resides. See, this is what Saint Francis of Assisi came to know. He experienced a profound gnosis. That was an enlightened being. So, in the time that we're in, when somebody starts teaching that, if somebody were to start doing that today, there would be massive outcries all across the world. Why? Because they would be seen as a heretic, somebody to be denounced, somebody to be burned at the stake, somebody to be crucified. Because they are telling us things about ourselves. That perhaps we have been doing things wrong for such an extended period of time. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is why I say, be very, very cautious about what you're asking for when you are seeking enlightenment, or you're seeking any kind of spiritual teacher to come and teach you or to accept you as a student. It's not quite as straightforward as what people think. And the process itself involves a lot of suffering and embarrassment. In a very true sense, you have to totally embarrass yourself. Okay? You have to do things that make you look like a total idiot. And the reason you have to do that is so that you can see which parts of yourself were totally useless, or which false images and narratives about yourself were totally useless, in terms of bringing your life some sort of joy or some sort of meaning. Okay? But if you bear these things in mind and you take on this challenge of becoming more conscious, and you stick at it, and you go through it, and as Shakespeare sort of said, you suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. If you go through all of that, on the other side of that is a profound peace to be found. You see, so many people today feel so empty and so alone because they don't realize that they're not alone. Okay? They are interconnected with all else. There's no reason for you to feel in any way, shape, or form disconnected. And perhaps one of the reasons we do, just as an aside, is to do with the fact that we've built these cages for ourselves, haven't we? We've got these concrete jungles, right? We've got these nice, comfortable homes, which is good in one sense, okay? Because it gives us a level of comfort, which should bring us happiness. And yet at the same time, it's disconnecting us from the natural world. In the mind, I mean, because you're always connected with it in a true sense, because the natural world is also within you. But we seem incapable of experiencing contentment, just existing and being. You see, this is where the fundamental problem is, the flaw in our thinking is. I'll give you an example of this, in fact, before I close off this video. I met someone some time ago who owned a Porsche, or a Porsche as they say. It's a type of automobile. If you're not already familiar, if you don't know what that is, I don't know where you've been living. So this guy had this Porsche and he parked it in his garage. And he never drove it. And he would always maintain it and wash it and wax it and everything else. But he never drove the car. And I thought, this is very strange. So I asked him one day, why don't you drive the car? And he says, because it would ruin the perfection of the car. Okay, that's what he said to me. And I thought, are you actually getting any joy from owning this or from using it? Now that doesn't mean, incidentally, that he shouldn't own it or use it. Okay? But the joy in having things, or if something comes your way or you purchase something, is to take pleasure in that thing. Not to keep it locked away where nobody can get at that, not even you. See, there's two types of materialism. One is the good kind of materialism, but that's not the kind that you see proliferating everywhere. The good kind of materialism is, if something comes your way, you accept it with gratitude, and at the same time you're happy to be using it to make use of it. There's a utility to it, to a good or a service or something else. The other type of materialism, which is profoundly it causes a profound state of suffering for us, because we go to all the effort of trying to maintain the thing and put the thing away, as far away from ourselves sometimes as possible, is one in which we are acquiring the material goods in order to please other people. Because we keep thinking about how we look through other people's eyes. Okay? And that type of materialism is self-destructive. Because you're never able to fully enjoy the thing. You've built up this false image, about other people's perceptions. Why should other people's perceptions matter when it comes to your sense of value or your sense of who you are? Other people's perceptions are only useful when they help you to recognize something about yourself which is either useful to you or not useful to you. Okay? If somebody can bring something to your attention about you, about your actions, about your thoughts, that is ultimately harming you, that is useful. But beyond that, if your deepest concern is what other people will think about you. And you're so paralyzed by fear as a result of that. And if that's the driving force in your quest for material gain, then it's just that's not going to create anything harmonious. It's not going to create a good life for you. Do you see? So this is the thing. But just to finish off this video, I'll try and keep this shorter than some of the previous ones. Be cautious in seeking enlightenment, because there's much more involved in it than what you're told by popular media. Do you understand? Or what appears on the surface. The results that you see, okay, the results that you see where people have gained something of a deep and meaningful sense are because they have put in an immense amount of effort. And this is the case with almost anything in life, by the way. See, it's different if you see the results and you say, well, I want that, but how can I get that? Let me put in all the effort that is required for me to get to that point. If it's a state of being, then to get to that state. Okay? If it's a material good, then to have that material good. But you need to be prepared to put in the effort. Because you don't know what people had to go through in order to get to where they are in any avenue of life. Do you see? Or how much suffering it's causing them, or it will cause them at the end of that, because you haven't thought deeply enough about that. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for this video. But I want to thank you very much for watching. Take good care of yourselves, and God bless every one of you.